the session recording after we've posted them all. It'll probably be a week or so after the conference has ended. And our speakers today for checklist are Ryan Allen and David Bauer from University of Dayton. And I'll let them go ahead and get started.
Okay, can you see my PowerPoint slides okay, Wilma?
Yes, I'm seeing it.
Okay. So welcome everybody. I hope everybody had a good lunch and is doing well. What we want to share today is a new feature that we've developed for the Lessons tool. So I'm going to give a little bit of background through some PowerPoint slides, and then we're going to jump in and do a live demo. I'm certainly open to comments, suggestions, questions throughout. So if Wilma wants to kind of jump in if I'm going too fast or missing something, I'm certainly open to that. David is sitting in here with me, and he will be able to kind of answer questions as well. So if we take a look at the need for a checklist, and so really this came from people saying things like, you know, from an instructor's point of view, you know, I do my best to lay content out so that students can see it, but they always seem to miss something. And there's always this kind of question of what's the best way to lay content out so that it's very clear. Now, from a student point of view, you know, what we always hear is the things like, you know, if I'm a student and I'm a working professional, I'm always afraid that I'm missing something when I check my classes. I can't see, you know, I can see long lists of tasks, but I'm afraid that I've either missed something or, you know, I don't know where I'm at in the process of working through this module. And so, for example, if we look at a couple of use cases here, you know, inside of Lessons tools, we've frequently worked with faculty to build different types of kind of checklists for the students. So this is an example of something you might see at the end of a module, just to kind of say, hey, can you answer yes to the following questions? If so, you're really ready to move on to the next module. And what we've heard from faculty in the past was it would be nice if this was interactive so that the students could kind of, you know, check things off as they did them to let themselves know and potentially let me know that they've done something. Sometimes it's taking a quiz or submitting an assignment. Other times it's just, hey, have you read this? So it's not necessarily something they would do in the site other than download the file to read. Another use case might be, you know, you have kind of a list, you know, and this is a real simple page of, you know, here's all the stuff I need you to do. And you might have a list at the top, you know, please do all the following things on this page. Or in this example, you have a lessons page that this faculty member built that has a ton of items down the page. So as you look at it, you'll see A, B, C, D, E. And if a student is working on this over a week or 2-week period, it's hard to know, you know, which one have I seen, especially if all the material kind of looks the same to you. And so the best we've really been able to kind of do is say, you know, make sure you've worked through all these activities before you move on to the next piece. Another example, you know, if you've built items, you know, we might even add a count at the top to say, you know, there are 4 tasks on this page. Make sure you work through all 4 tasks. We've even had instructors use subpages and number the buttons so that students understand that there's a sequence that they are supposed to be moving through. But still, students get kind of lost. Have I been to this page? Have I not been to this page? And so it's an imperfect solution. Finally, we've had instructors even just download question mark images and include those in their lessons page so the student understands that it's supposed to be kind of a checklist. So why did we develop a checklist feature? So, I mean, back to what I just said, really it helps address a common problem of a student being able to kind of track their progress through a content module. You know, UD faculty, University of Dayton faculty have requested this feature to us. And also at the June Sakai conference, this was something that I heard others talking about in terms of something they might want. So we kind of said, okay, let's put it on our development roadmap and let's see if we can tackle that. And really when we came back from the June conference, it was just a matter of let's kind of draw this out. And you'll see these kind of janky pictures here of kind of the initial inception. You know, what would it look like for someone to add a checklist to the lessons tool? You know, you'll see that you give it a title, how many items do you want, defining these items, the ability to add more at any time or reorder them, what it might look like for the student so that they can kind of see where they're at in the module. kind of a nice feature that we dreamt of initially was, wouldn't it be nice if the instructor could see which students have checked off which items? And then kind of further down the road, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, the ability to not just have text items in a checklist, but also link them to assignments or quiz completion, or potentially, you get to check this item on a list after you've posted 3 times in the forums tool, which was the requirement of this module. So that's kind of the integration that we're looking at. So we really sat down and we kind of said, okay, what's the scope of this? And we listed out everything that we thought we would want the lessons checklist to be able to do. And we kind of broke it up into phases, and we said, okay, phase 1, let's just do kind of the core of it. We'll start to get into some of the nicer features when we get into phase 2 and 3. So far we have completed all of phase 1, some of phase 2. And so if we take a look at that, so we've made it so a faculty member could add a checklist in the lessons tool. They can reorder the items in the checklist. They can delete items. They can rename items. We wanted students to be able to have an interactive experience of checking items off of the list, a seamless save process for students. So as soon as they click on something to save it, it's saved. They don't have to hit a save button afterwards. We wanted the feature to be group aware, like most items in Sakai. And we also wanted the checklist title to be hidden from students if the faculty member wanted it so. And I'll show you why in a second. What we got into as phase 2 was allowing faculty to see which items each student has checked off, and then allowing faculty members to not only kind of see which items students have checked off in checklist 1, but then quickly let them jump to checklist 2 or checklist 3 to see how they're doing there. Okay, so what it looks like in our instance is that in the lessons tool, and we're on 2.9, underneath more tools, we now have a new object that says add checklist. If a user clicks on that, they are brought to a screen that looks like this, where they are able to give it a title, a description, and then they can add as many items as they want to the checklist. You'll see that there's a checkbox there that allows a user to hide the checklist name from students. And again, let's just say that you want to call it Module 1 checklist, but you don't want students to see that because it messes up the styling of the elements on the page around it. So you can kind of turn that off. You don't have to include a description if you don't want to, so that can kind of keep the checklist nice and small if you need it to be that way. Okay, so this is filled in of a little bit of content, right? So Module 1 checklist, we're going to tell them to work through certain items and check them off as they go. We need them to read something, watch something, read something, watch something, submit a case study, and submit a homework. And you'll see that we've kind of added all of the elements that was part of the scope of phase 1, renaming, reordering, group aware, those kind of things. This isn't anything, I'm sure, too special to anybody. So what it looks like for the student, and this is kind of as plain Jane as it can get. You can have the title showing the elements of the checklist, and then you'll see the first 2 items are checked, the other items are not checked. There is kind of a hover action, so that if I were to hover over the checkbox for read chapter 2, it would show me a gray check mark until I click it, just so that students understand that that's what's supposed to happen. On another side, the instructor view, this is what that would look like on the page to the instructor. So you'll see that there's a text object above it and there's a text object below it. We're trying to kind of marry this content together so it looks slick. In this case, the instructor has chosen to hide the title, and that's why it's in parentheses and italicized there. But they have provided some description. You'll also notice that there is a view progress button that we've added below the edit. This allows the instructor at any point to jump to a view that shows them how well the students are progressing through. That page looks like this. So there's styling and tweaks that we know we want to make, but kind of our first pass of it was give me a student list, show me all of the elements that are in that checklist across the top, and we kind of angled them up to save space. We didn't want too much horizontal scrolling if we could help it. We haven't quite locked this in, but this is kind of our best version of it yet. Items that are checked, obviously students have done. You can sort any of those columns. And you'll notice in the upper right hand side there's a blue button that says Other Checklists. If you click on that, it allows you to basically quickly navigate to the progress screen for any of the other checklists that you would have inside your site. Okay, so I'm going to jump to a live demo of this, but I wanted to pause just in case to see if there was any questions out there right now that I could answer before we move forward.
I do have a few questions that have come in. One question is, can the student back out of a check if they check the wrong item?
They can, so it's just kind of a check or uncheck, and they can do that as many times as they want.
Okay. Another question is, I guess some of the checklist features are available in Dashboard, for example, assignment submissions, etc.
I'm not too familiar with that, so I can't speak to that.
Okay, and are the checklists lesson page specific?
I'm trying to think of the best way to answer that question. You can have checklists as many places as you want. You can kind of quickly jump to any of the checklists in any of the lessons pages, if that answers that question.
One other question is, has accessibility been considered in the development?
Yeah. Yep, that's something that we pay attention to when we develop anything.
Great. Those are all the questions we have right now. So if you want to move on to the live demo.
Okay. So at this point, you should be seeing, let me switch one more time here. You should be seeing a web page. This is one of our test servers. Our instance of Sakai is called Isidore. So if I'm a student and I'm logged into this site, again, the majority of content is going to be driven through the course modules tool. And so what I've done is I've kind of just built out a few different examples for us to take a look at. So on this page, I have 5 modules of different examples here. And to give you an idea of kind of where this problem sometimes comes in, let's just say this instructor who has created module 1, they have content laid out in a nice way. At some point we jump to a task view. And on this page, what we've really done is we've really tried to kind of make it as clean as we can styling-wise in terms of what you need them to do. First thing, read and review Chapter 1 materials. Do the same for Chapter 2, complete a case study report, and then complete homework. And again, when it comes to 4 items, I think a student generally understands where they're at. But just to kind of show you what this could look like, we wanted to throw a checklist in here and kind of see what that could look like. So if we look at the second version of that, we still go to a Module 1 tasks page. But what we've done is we've built in a checklist at the top. So this is one way you could use it. It's just another element on a lessons page. And a student can come through and they say, okay, I've read Chapter 1. And you'll see that, you'll get a save message. It will go away, but it gives a confirmation. The student doesn't need to save through a save button on the screen. If they say, I actually want to go back and rewatch mini lecture 1, all I need to do is uncheck that, and that would take that away. But you could kind of quickly go through and you can kind of check all these items on the page, and then that's your view. And so when I log back in, anything I've checked is still checked. Pretty self-explanatory there. Another way that you could use the checklist could be, instead of having one central checklist, potentially you have a checklist with items throughout the page. So in this version, we scroll down and we look at the Module 1 tasks page. And instead of having a central checklist, what we've done is we've really kind of built in a identify things as soon as they've done them. Now, there's lots of other ways we could style this. This is kind of using plain text right now, so we could turn this into a WYSIWYG element where you could kind of use color and bold and things like that. But we've tried to keep it as kind of simple as possible as we built this. We didn't want the scope of it to grow too much. In some ways, we like to kind of release a feature that we think is useful, see what type of feedback we get from our users as they progress through using it, and then maybe go back and add some enhancements. Some of that's also built into what we are calling phase 2 and phase 3 of this project. So again, a student can check items off that way. If we look at a couple other examples, what we might be used to seeing is this page where we say, kind of do all these things. But if we add the checklist, we can now kind of replace that with a list where they can identify the things they've done. And I'll show just kind of one other example here. We talked about, are you ready to move on? And this might be a page that an instructor would build into their site. Have you done all of these things? And we can reformat that just a bit and make it look like a list of things that have already been checked if they've done them, or they can kind of check them as they go throughout. If I switch to my instructor view, okay, so if I'm an instructor and I'm in this site, and again, we've added all of these checklists throughout. So if I'm an instructor and I go in and I say, okay, I've added this checklist to this page, and I've added it at the top. So you'll see here's the title I gave it, here's the description. At any point I can edit this list. If I wanted, let's just say I wanted homework 1 to actually be in front of case study 1, or element if I wanted to. And again, at any point what I can do is I can click on view progress. And this will show me a listing of everybody in the site who has done, has completed those items on the page. And so I say, okay, module 1 checklist, that's interesting that Leonardo Canessa has already done everything. Let's see how far he is through the module 2 checklist. And now it will jump to the checklist on that page, and we would see, okay, he obviously hasn't gone anywhere on that page as of yet. So this is kind of the process of using this feature. Again, at any point I could just go in here and I could add a checklist. And if I just, called it anything, I could, hide the title, and I could even I could make a list of 20 items or just a list of, have you completed this item? And if it's just a 1-item checklist, as we often see in lessons, it throws it at the bottom. This item just now lives at the bottom of the page. I could move it wherever. I could make 5 different checklists that all just have 1 item that say completed, and then kind of drop them between objects. So this is really the basis of checklist at this point. I have some other things to show, but again, I'll pause in case there's any questions.
One question is, how easily could this feature be added to our current version of Lessons tool in Sakai 10?
So that's something I'll address, or we'll address we have just a few more slides, and that's kind of part of the end that I can get to, and we'll see if that answers the question.
Okay. And does this tool tie into site statistics?
It does not. It does not. And again, this is kind of one of those things where as we got into it, we really kind of said, do we want this to be a grading or an accreditation type thing? And really at this point, we're just trying to use it for informational purposes to help the students track their own progress. And if the faculty member can drive usage the correct way and get students to actually check the items, help the instructor know kind of where they're at throughout the process. And the application of this could be any number of things, right? I mean, it could be a site where there's nothing that you do inside the site except check things off to let somebody know that you've kind of made progress. So we've tried to kind of make it generic and, useful in many different situations.
Okay, we have another comment. This is a wonderful tool for instruction and beautifully implemented. Is the code available for other colleges on Sakai 2.9?
Yeah, so that's something that again, I'll get to in just a second here. I got just a few more slides.
Okay. You mentioned being able to hyperlink checklist items. Is that something you can do now or something that will be implemented in a future phase?
Yeah, so that's a great segue. Hopefully you're seeing the PowerPoint slides again. Um,
Yes.
the first item that you see that we have left that is kind of the next thing that we're going to start on is allowing faculty members to connect to existing lesson page items. So assessments, tests and quizzes, assignments, resources, forums. Our original plan at this point is anything that you can mark as a required item, I think is the right language, you would be able to link to a lessons object, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. You know, we also have plans in the future in phase 3, which might be down the road a little bit, to kind of do things like, you know, allow for multiple checklists to be combined. So, you know, completion of a sub-checklist would check a single item on a master checklist, that sort of thing. You know, the idea of having a checklist, you know, restyle it a bit so it lives on the right side of the screen and maybe scrolls with the user as opposed to having to sit centrally on a page is something that's interesting to us. Making items kind of subtasks on a checklist so that completion of 3 subtasks would kind of check the top item on the list, sort of thing. So we have some other kind of ideas of what we want to do moving forward. It's just a matter of you know, when we'll get to those specific features.
Okay.
So the mock-up of just what we think linking a checklist to an exam or assignment might be, and this is a pretty early mock-up. It's not terribly pretty to look at, as you'll see that in theory you would be able to give any checklist title any title you want and then be able to kind of click on a link to link it to another item on the page. So for instance, you know, if you have set up a quiz on the same lessons page and you have required that they get 5 points on it before they pass that quiz, you know, you set that all up on the quiz item, and then you actually just kind of build that linking back to the checklist. And when they pass whatever the prerequisites are on the item, it would check that box. It's kind of a goofy way to say it, but that's what it might look like. From a student perspective, what we imagine it to look like, you know, these are items that they would not be able to check themselves. So you'll see the last 2 items on that page are links, and maybe those are links to the objects themselves, the assignments or the quizzes, and maybe an informational pop-up box that would kind of say, look, you can't manually check this. This item will be checked once you complete that activity. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this slide in just a second so I can kind of answer a couple of the other questions that have come up. So we developed this for UD's version of Sakai that we're on right now, 293. You know, we kind of made development decisions that were based on our eventual move to Sakai 11 next year. You know, we don't want to redo this any more than we have to when we move and merge it. So, you know, we tried to make that as easy as we could. Because we're not on 210, we had to pull back pieces from a Lesson Builder ticket, Lesson Builder 190. There was just one table added to the database to track student progress. And the checklist was really designed to work like any other object in the lessons tool. You know, you can reorder it, you can copy it as group aware. If you duplicate the site, it comes with it, that sort of thing. So getting the checklist tool code. And this is one of those tricky things. You know, we've created a community ticket for this, Lesson Builder 540. And if you download the slides from the presentation that's linked, where you could jump to that, you know, we're going to add a patch as soon as possible. And we can imagine adding a patch for 2.9, 2.10, and maybe, you know, an 11 eventually. At this point, the best thing to do is really kind of say, you know, click on the watch button so that you can kind of see as soon as we do that work. If this is something that is super interesting and pressing to you, you know, you can shoot me an email. My email is at the bottom of that page there. We're also happy to create kind of guest instructor accounts for users to log in and try this feature out. You know, we're kind of in the process of putting up a kind of a public QA server with our code on it. So we'd be happy to do that. Probably early December is when our plan would be. But anybody who's interested, I'd be happy to do that for you. So that's kind of the end of our presentation. So I'm going to jump back to this. You know, questions, what have we missed? What else would be cool to add?
We did have a question about whether or not checklists could be used in another tab.
Another tab. So it's just built lessons tool right now.
Okay. And at the moment, it looks like students check off items themselves, so it's reliant on them checking it off. I know you mentioned you were going to tie it to other items. Will that automatically update when they complete a quiz, turn in an assignment, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's definitely our plan right now. When we added this, this is kind of just like anything else, a nice feature that, gives students who want to use it the ability to kind of check items off. If there was a long list of things on a page, we would envision them kind of having the ability to do that. Let me go back just to show you kind of one example here. If we look at a page like this, and I showed this picture early on, right, this instructor had just built a long list of items on the page. If you're the student, you can imagine kind of coming to this site multiple times throughout the week. You can kind of just, as you do things, you could build a checklist item and just drop it below each item. This page of text and links already existed, and I created all of these elements very quickly and just dropped them in a matter of probably less than 5 minutes. And so a student can come here and say, okay, I've been through this, now I need to start here, as opposed to trying to remember where they were at. And so in some ways, we're trying to keep it simple early on. When you get into the linking of the assignments and Samigo elements and things like that, it just gets inherently a little bit more complicated.
Do you find that students do actually check off their tasks when they complete them?
This is something that we have just finished developing and hope to roll out in a couple weeks here. So, we've consulted with students as we built it. But again, a lot of this was built around faculty who develop content a certain way and ask that students kind of understand that they've done specific items before they move on in a course. This is just, in our mind, just another piece to hopefully help accomplish that goal without putting too much ownership on any one faculty member to add these items or the student to check them off.
After a student checks the checkbox, is it still possible for an instructor to change the title of that checkbox?
Yeah, and it will respect the check as long as you're editing the title as opposed to deleting that element and adding in another element, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So here you see it says completed. If I went in there as the instructor and marked this to say done instead of completed, Joe Smith or whoever had already checked this, it would still stay checked for them.
Okay, great. We are actually just about out of time. Actually, we're a minute over. So I'm just going to take one more question and then we need to wrap up. So did you say that there would be a course summary checklist so a student could see the entire course at a glance?
Yeah, I think that's in some ways what our dream of this whole thing is. When we started, we had to kind of build the foundation first, but the idea that you could kind of use this like a course progress, right? Maybe on the main modules page when you first get in there, there's kind of a master checklist of every item that you need to do in a site if the site was prepared well enough, which is asking a lot sometimes. But yes, we would hopefully want to roll it back into having kind of master checklists where the completion of these items would kind of roll up into another checklist.
Well, that's wonderful. It looks like really exciting work there. So I'm sure a lot of folks will be watching that closely to see when it's available. Thank you both for showing us what you've been working on. And again, if we didn't get to your question, I do apologize. We do have a hard stop because I have to go launch the break session. We're actually doing a trivia contest during break. So if you're interested in checking out your Sakai trivia skills, you might want to head over to the break. We're giving away a $20 gift certificate to the winner. So thanks again, Ryan and David, and I hope everyone who attended enjoyed the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for attending. And again, if there's of interest to you, please shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to work with you in any way I can to, kind of either help you get this in the near future or just kind of play with it yourself on our instance. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone.